and welcome everyone. I'm Ari Lax, and this week I'm going to be recording with the deck that I mentioned in my article from Monday, October 24th. And that deck is the 10th place deck from Grand Prix Providence by Julian Wilds, and that is, I listed it as 4-color energy here, but it's really just 4-color aggro that happens to have some energy components to it. And the idea is that look at this untapped mana. Look at how good all of this is. You just get to do whatever you want, whenever you want with your mana. Great stuff. And because of that, just the way everything works out, it's really easy for you to just play single color cards that are on weird splashes, like, Voltaic Brawler and Spell Queller. Sure, why not? And just have this really high powered deck. And a lot of this is tied together by a Tomb with Aether, which I think is actually just one of the most powerful cards in the set. Um, Probably like top five. I mean, it's hard to say. This set's very powerful, but you know, I think at the end of the day, we're gonna see that a Tune with Aether after the block and everything's over is gonna be one of the top five cards in the set. It's just the cheapest, most efficient free roll energy enabler, and it feels a lot like you're getting a card and a half or two cards, like a full cantrip's worth of value for one mana. So beyond that, for fixing, we have Servant of the Conduit, um, just a solid body and solid fixing. We got Long Tusk Cub, powerful, fast threat. I know I used to play with Slith Firewalker and Constructed, and this card is just so much better. It pumps on damage. You can use existing energy. You can float energy over to other threats. It's just super flexible, very strong clock for 2 mana. Woodland Wanderer is kind of an under-respected card over the last, what now, year that it's been out. And just 4 mana 6/6 is great. It didn't see a lot of play in the Battle for Zendikar initial printing era with fetches and battle lands, which is kind of sad because it was pretty well fitted for that metagame. But at the same time, that metagame didn't. It was well fitted for the cards, the mana that supported it, but it was poorly fitted for the metagame that evolved. Just being like a dork that died to removal was not the place to be in that format. But I think now might be the time for it to shine. It's just 4 mana 6/6 Vigilance Trample's very powerful. Even 4 mana 5/5 Vigilance Trample's pretty good. And then Voltaic Brawler, just cheap, big attacking threat. Easy enough. These are your beating doofuses. Then you got your value creatures. Reflector Mage, we all know about Reflector Mage. It's worse than it used to be. I suggested replacing this with Blossoming Defenses in some amount, but I just want to try out the initial list and see how it goes. Spell Queller, great card. We all know about Spell Queller from last season. We just play all the good cards in this deck. You get ahead on tempo, and more than any other deck, it feels like this deck abuses that with just big, giant, trampling attackers. Whirler Virtuoso, I'm interested to see how it performs. It's not the most raw powerful, but the energy has good conversion rates around it in this deck, so maybe making a couple flyers. I think you just need to make 2 flyers with this to make it really great. So it's possible with like an Attune or a leftover Servant mana. Because your only energy sources, these are not the most important. You know, you're not going to use all your energy on a servant every time. You're not going to use all your energy on a brawler every time. So there might be enough left over to make Whirler Virtuoso, 1 blue-red, 2/1/1s, and a 2/3, which is definitely constructed playable. Tireless Tracker, grind out some value. And these are all the good creatures we know from last season. We've seen all these cards, we know what they do. This card got worse, still a fine card. And then Verdurous Gearhulk, big beefy on the top end. You will notice that there's not a lot, there's only 2. That's because once you get past 3 mana, the upside of these fast lands is that you do have early mana that works, but your 4 and 5 drops are a little sketchier. So you're not going to cast on time as much, so you can't rely on having 4. And then light on interaction, we have Harness Lightning, just generic cheap removal spell, great. We have free energy to pump it up, great. And then Tameo Field Researcher, this card is just absurdly powerful. Um, Drawing free cards is great, but really the thing that it does the most that scares me whenever I play against it is the double Frost Breath, especially when it can tap down vehicles that aren't animated. One of the few cards that can interact that way. It's just in any racing scenario, it's just so hard to beat this card. Um, yeah, to me it was just great. Looking at the mana, you're forest heavy for a tune, only 1 evolving. And that's mostly for tracker, honestly. You can fix a little bit with it, but the fact that you get the extra clue off this is nice. And as you'll see in the sideboard, there's another Evolving Wilds for when you board in the rest of your trackers against anti-control threats. You got Blossoming Defenses' cheap interaction on top of negates some ceremonious rejections for Marvel, though those might be overkill right now. They do have some splash damage against being able to take out like a Void Shatter or whatever. But I'm not sold on these moving forward. Again, just trying the list as is to see. We got some Jaces as a big anti-control threat, kind of. You just draw enough threats that this basically is a threat. Then we've got Harness Lightning and Reflector Mage to interact with creatures your opponents are casting. Pretty straightforward. We were just playing the good cards. This is about the extent of, I think, where you can stretch the mana. I think any more and things start to crack. But it does a good job of it, and I'm excited to see um, how all these cards play out together and really exactly how consistent the ambitious mana base is.